with you. You know, I got to hand it to you. You really keep your happy disposition even in the worst of times. And I want you to tell me when you watch this little video clip in Cinderella, when you might get an idea that Cinderella is in for some pretty bad times.
What's the matter with her? Wake up, stupid! We've got to get dressed. Dressed? Oh, yes. We must get dressed. It would never do for the Duke to see me. Mother, did you see what she did? Are you just going to let her walk out? So this is love. La-dee-da-da-da-da. La-da-da-da. Oh, no. No, please. Oh, you can't do this. You just can't. Let me out. You must let me out. You can't keep me in here. Oh.
Oh, thank goodness for the little mice who came to rescue poor Cinderella. So I want to talk briefly about foreshadowing and what it means. And it's really kind of an advanced skill. And I'm very happy to teach this because hopefully this is something you actually have not learned about before in the past. So what I wanted you to notice in Cinderella was that there was this part where Cinderella's evil stepmother's eyes turned awfully evil. I mean, the whole "if the looks could kill" analogy, my gosh, it was just a terrifying look that she gave poor Cinderella. Cinderella was happy dancing. She's excited to see the prince that night, and the evil stepmother is basically saying, "Yeah, over my dead body, and just wait to see what I have in store for you." And what's interesting about that is she doesn't have to say a word. She does not have to say a word. All she has to do is give that look. And Disney was very good at that. And you'll see a lot of what's called foreshadowing in Disney movies. So foreshadowing, I hope you notice my cool little foreshadowed title here. Foreshadowing is a literary device which the writer gives an advance hint of what is to come later on in the story. It's like a clue as to what is coming up. And sometimes it's really subtle, which means it's hard to notice unless you're really paying attention, or sometimes it's real obvious. I mean, the Cinderella one is pretty obvious based on how evil she seems to be looking, okay? Foreshadowing doesn't usually happen at the end of the story because remember, it's got to foreshadow something. Something has to come after it. So foreshadowing often appears at the beginning of a story or a chapter, and it helps the reader develop expectations about the coming events in a story. You know, based on some sort of foreshadowing, that something is coming up, and you know to look for that. So how do authors use foreshadowing? Well, there are various ways of creating foreshadowing. First of all, a writer may use dialogues of characters to hint at what may occur in the future. So just based on what they say, they may talk about things that might drop a clue into what is coming in the book later on. In addition to that, any event or action in the story may throw a hint to the readers about future events or action. And even a title of the work or a chapter title can act as a clue that suggests what is going to happen. I just want you to think for a second about the title Freak the Mighty. Freak the Mighty, in a way, is foreshadowing because you find out later on why they're called Freak the Mighty. Foreshadowing in fiction creates an atmosphere of suspense in a story so that the readers are interested to know more.
Mason Fleshman, if you're in the building, please come to the front office. Mason Fleshman, come to the front office.
No, that was great. Great interruption. Okay. So anyways, it creates an atmosphere of suspense in a story. The readers are interested to know more. They want to know what's going to happen next. So we have some examples. I'll start with this one, and it's more of an advanced one. I'm sure you all know the idea of the story of Romeo and Juliet, or at least you've heard about it. These two, man and woman, who are deeply in love, but they can't get married because the parents, the two families, hate each other and basically have said, if you guys marry each other, you're both going to die. And so they really can't win. However, they're willing to risk death because they're so in love with one another. And they talk about this all the time in the Shakespeare's great language. They talk about how they oftentimes are willing to risk death in order to be together. Well, in the end, I won't give anything away. I mean, you're going to touch on this later in your school career, but they end up dying for love. Them talking about it was a foreshadowing to what was coming up. Taking it back to more 5th, 6th grade stuff. Hatchet. Brian is stranded in the middle of the wilderness. Well, anyone who's read Hatchet knows that how did he get stranded in the wilderness? Well, the pilot, he's on a small plane. The pilot dies. He has to land the plane himself. So in the midst of him trying to land this plane, he looks out the window as he's getting ready to crash land in the Canadian wilderness, and he sees a moose. A moose is just standing there, and among all this stuff, he notices there's a moose there. Well, wouldn't you know it? Later in the book, he was attacked by a moose in a very violent way where he's I think he's trying to get some water or he's fishing or something. Okay. Finally, we talk about Freak the Mighty. In Freak the Mighty, we get a hint that Max might actually turn violet even later because he was nicknamed the Kicker. Okay, that is foreshadowing. It might not mean anything, but it might. I want to tell you, not all what you think is clues is necessarily foreshadowing, but sometimes it really is. And so I want you to pay attention. So my directive for you is when you're reading, when you're paying attention to the book you're reading, I want you to pay attention to what you think might be coming up based on some of the things that the author is mentioning. This is interesting. I found this on the internet, of course. It's your first year, she said, and that is Prim in The Hunger Games. And Katniss says, they're not going to pick you, she said. This is an example of foreshadowing. It's your first year, she said. They're not going to pick you, she said. And what happens, of course? She gets picked.